All right, y'all. Hello and welcome. This is Willpop Vinyl back with another video, doing something a little bit different, which is a strange thing to say because the channel is so new. But today I want to dig into Discogs, my experience, how I feel as someone who's a very active user, what I would like to see changed or improved. I'll do my best to keep this positive, but I've written down a bunch of things the past couple weeks as I have been thinking about making this video. Some will be minor, some will be more major. Let's start with a kind of minor one though, and with the magic of OBS, I will make myself small. You can see I've got the Discogs window ready to go here. And I'm only bringing this up because I think for a lot of people who might be newer to record collecting or maybe new to the idea of creating a collection profile on Discogs, they're going to interact with the search bar a lot. If you've used this, you've probably experienced this thing I'm going to point out here. But the search bar is very bad at finding individual names of artists, especially if those names are like real person names versus a band name. But that can even extend to band names and things too. So the biggest offender is the default return. So I'm going to show a record I picked up recently on a trip down to DC to visit my brother. And this is a band called Gong Gong Gong. It's kind of like a noisy experimental art rock group, and just found it. And so Gong Gong Gong. And what do we get? Under all, which is supposed to be querying the entire database, I assume, we get an artist whose name is just Gong. We get Tough Gong label, another label called Gong, variations of Tough Gong here. Under artists, we don't get them either. We get a lot of people whose last name is Gong, or again, the artist Gong. So already here, or this one, Dewili Gonga, which is like, doesn't even have Gong in the name. So kind of strange that I've put in a pretty precise name. There's probably not multiple bands with this name. It's not coming up anywhere. You can kind of write this one off because the band does use Chinese characters in their name, even though this is a US release. So the actual name of this album, and if we go back to here, is Phantom Rhythm. And here it comes up just behind two titles that don't really share that much. Kill 'Em All, for whatever reason, is the number one return. Not sure why. Maybe there's a track on there called Phantom Rhythm. I've not listened to that record. This band, and then here's what we're looking for. Phantom Rhythm by Gong Gong Gong. And yeah, so there's these Chinese characters here, but there's Chinese characters here in front of Phantom Rhythm, so I'm not really sure why it's preferencing one way or another. I'm assuming they're kind of using that all function to bring up search results that they think are more popular, trying to do maybe a little bit of a Google type thing versus actually coming up with a precise result. This happens a lot with names too. So here's another record I just bought from a label on Bandcamp. And let's just start by searching this one with the first artist. There's two artists on here. Their name is Micah Frank. And give it a second to think. And what do we get? We're just getting Frank Ocean, Frank Ocean, Frank Ocean. Just showing me all of the, it's at least giving me the master release here, but then it's just showing me all of probably the fake Frank Ocean records that have been put out over the years that they don't allow you to buy, sell, or trade on the platform, but for whatever reason they are listing them and they're now clogging up the search results. However, if we do go to artist, at least Micah Frank comes up here, and we can hop on over, and here's my release, the music of Hildegard von Bingen. Go check this one out from the Pure Magnetic label. And let's jump in here, and we'll use this as a way to segue into another issue that I have with Discogs, which is the challenges of editing and participating in the actual database, in the wiki style thing that they've developed here, which is so great, right? I mean, the fact that this record, which 9 people have, 13 want, I was able to find this, right? And there's 4 different people who have contributed to this entry. So, I mean, that's a lot of participation for something that not a lot of people have heard or maybe don't care about, which is great. But this entry is incomplete. There's a lot of information still missing here. The credits are good, and the track list looks good. They've actually got the images up. A lot of times when you find small releases like this that don't have a lot of popularity, They might just have one default image. They don't have the actual images of the discs or any of the inserts that comes in. But this one is missing the barcode number, which would be very useful to have, because if you found this in the wild and you wanted to scan it with your app, your Discogs app, having that barcode in there would mean it could take you right to this page. Very, very useful, potentially. For something like this where there's only one pressing, especially very useful. But it's also missing the runouts or the dead wax, which, if this record did become popular and it became re-released many times over decades, we'd want to have that information, because you might be looking at a pressing where they've kept all the art, the label art and the jacket art the same, and the only way to distinguish the pressing might be sometimes, and the barcode can persist too, I should say. So the only way to distinguish might be the runouts. So to do that, we have to hit edit release. And first we're taking to this page here, which is really overwhelming. This is tracking the history of all the edits that have been made. Almost all of them are made 3 years ago, I assume, right when this record was released. Perhaps some of these people are from the label or the band themselves. I'm not going to get into all of the, someone got warnings here. So this is all very intimidating. I have no idea what it means. I'm not sure what this is over here. I don't know why, am I allowed to remove the release? Why would I want to do this? We see revision history. So right away, very intimidating. And the thing to know is that you can basically just ignore all of this if you just want to go add some simple information, but you have to know that. You have to actually want to work with the system and figure it out. So I have figured out that you skip all this and then you just hit edit release again, and now it will load into the editing thing. And this is going really slow today, so I'll pause and let it load. And there we go. I don't know why it's going so slow today, and we're going to loop back to that in the last topic. But this is what the actual editing interface looks like. There are some folks on YouTube who have made videos about how to edit and create new entries or clone entries to create new versions of an entry, right? If there's like a color variant or a later re-release of something. But that is all based on like a previous UI for the website, and a lot of the flow is not up to date. Discogs himself has not done a lot of work, I think, in my opinion, to make this process easier. Both from a UX standpoint, but also from a they have these submission guidelines and quick start guides that I have not found very helpful in trying to figure out how to do things like create a new release from scratch. So this is something where they could easily just have a employee, probably someone who's involved with maintaining this, simply make a video, write a script and show how easy, quote unquote easy, it could be to create something new. And I have made a few new ones. I'm not going to go through that process because they're very challenging. Maybe I'll try to write a script myself and take a crack at it. But here, just to say, I would go in and I could click down here. I could type in the barcode, add the barcode. I can make another one for matrix and runouts and add that information. And I will probably come back and do that. But all to say, this process is very difficult to kind of feel confident enough to do. And it also challenges you again at the bottom, I should say, because once you fill out all the information, you then have to go to the submission notes and you have to justify or back up the information that you're adding. So 99% of the time, the answer is I'm taking the information from the record in hand, which is also the spirit of the guidelines. They only want you to really be putting information on here that comes from the records. The problem is a lot of that information tends to get outsourced into places like Bandcamp or label websites. So you're not really supposed to take that stuff. I suspect a lot of people do, especially when it comes to things like these track list durations, which they say you're not supposed to take from Bandcamp. You have to actually listen to the record and time it, or it has to be printed on the record. I doubt anyone's really doing that. So it's kind of weird that they don't allow you to take information from other places when that would really expedite the process of getting a lot of this stuff in. But for things like the barcode and the dead wax, that's always going to come from the records anyways, because I've never seen someone on a label put that information on a website. But again, just another point of friction where if you were new to this and you did go through the effort of putting some photos up, or you did want to put the barcode or the matrix, then you hit this thing and it basically tells you that this is going to be reviewed by someone, some moderator, and I guess if they don't like your submission notes, they're going to reject your edit, and that would be a bad experience. I've rarely had things rejected, but again, that might be enough to put someone off from wanting to participate, which We want people to participate, of course. So we'll leave here now, and we're going to talk about, again, so Discogs is having issues today, which is unfortunate because this is the time that I've allotted myself to do this video. But here we go. We're going to go to the shop. So shop music here. They've also redesigned this homepage recently to show you what's best selling and what's most valuable. I've not found any of this to be super interesting to me. Every now and then they'll put something in here like a story, like they had an ambient guide a few months ago. That was cool. But yeah, I kind of ignore all of this stuff and I go to shop music. You can go to these other things here. I'm not sure what they do. Like, let's see what new and upcoming does. Actually, I guess this is a way to, see what new releases might be coming out. But this is from, I don't know. This is weird. I've never explored any of this, to be honest. I've never wanted to, because the primary way that I interact with Discogs, and I expect the primary way most people interact with Discogs, besides logging their own collection, is building their want list. So let's go check out my want list by shopping my wants. And this, to me, and the reason I'm calling this out or thinking about this, is because Discogs as a business, right? They don't make any money on the Wikipedia database side. That's more of a public service. They make all of their money and they sustain off of the fees that they collect from people who are selling. And, for there to be sellers, there have to be buyers. So the whole purpose of this is to pair buyers with sellers. And this is the relatively new marketplace. I believe they put this out a couple of months ago. And I saw some people try to give feedback on the Discogs Reddit, because I didn't like the changes. And so immediately I wanted to go see if other people didn't like the changes. I didn't see very much interaction there, if any, from anyone within the Discogs team. I was trying to find, there is a forums on Discogs where I think you can interact and report bugs and stuff, but I was not seeing any threads there or anyone talking about it. So I kind of get the sense there's not much community built up around Discogs, which is unfortunate, and we can talk about that again at the end. But let's focus on the shop here. So they made a big deal of redesigning the shop, and the thing that they designed it around, or the thing that they were really championing, was what we have on the left bar here. All of these new ways to sort and filter your wants. Now, I have probably a few hundred wants. I know some people in the VC have reported they have thousands of things on their want list. Perhaps for them, some of these things are interesting. But to me, almost all of what they've put in here is really superfluous. And it kind of, to me, seems like the person who designed this was coming at it from the angle of like, well, here's all the metadata that we have, and let's just give people all these different ways to chop it up. And they weren't really thinking about, well, how do people actually shop? The way that I shop is and the way I used to shop back before they made this change, was I would go to my items I want shop like this. I would go to sort, and they had something in here where you could find the sellers who have the most things that you want on your want list. So like for this example, this Mayan Berlin, this is like a record store that specializes in Japanese pressings, and there's a few Japanese pressings of like classic rock stuff that I want, and they have 14 items that I want. That's amazing. So that's really interesting for me to look at, because that would be coming from Germany, and I'd want to like save on shipping by combining a lot there. Same thing with this seller here, Pagita, has great ratings, also in Germany. 5 items I want. That's great to know. So I personally was shopping by who has the most of what I want. And they had they also had they had it on the side too. You could actually see this. Maybe it wasn't actually the sort like this, but they had these buttons on the side, and there was one that was sellers, and you could just see who had the most. And I think that was the way I was looking at it. And that to me was awesome. That was how I did almost all of my ordering up until a couple months ago. I still do my ordering that way. It's just a lot more work. I have to scroll and scroll and scroll and find who has multiple items. I can no longer search for that, which sucks. Excuse me. This is the third time I record this video, so I've been drinking seltzer to like clear my throat. So what did they replace it with? Well, they replaced it with ships from, which is actually useful, because if I don't feel like paying for shipping, I might just filter for United States only. I think that makes a lot of sense. Format. I mean, if you were someone else who was more into, if you had a mixed bag of vinyl, CDs, cassettes, maybe you are not that prioritizing your vinyl that much and you only want to look at CDs right now, so you might want to use that filtering. Format like 45s for 7-inch versus single. Condition is useful for sure because people already kind of fudge condition, and so maybe you want to only do VG plus, near mint, and mint and completely exclude very good and below. I think that's fine. And then genre, rock, electronic, pop. So a lot of these to me are weird. Like genre I think is weird, format is weird personally, and the format description I think are weird because I've already built my want list as a buyer, as a collector. I can't imagine a collector psychographic that sits down, they get home from work, maybe they just got paid, they want to go buy some records on Discogs, and they sit down and they've got their want list of 1,000 records, and they go, today I only want to shop for funk and soul. Like if that was the case, then it's on your want list, right? It's representative. Like who only wants to shop for a particular genre in a session? So maybe this is something that I haven't developed into as a collector. Perhaps if you're someone who has thousands of records and maybe you don't have any jazz in your collection and you only want to see jazz and you want to preference it, but it just feels strange to me because for me, like, it's much more important for me to know who I can buy from efficiently than try to like dissect my want list by genre, or like even more, I think like corner case would be like who would go on and say like I only want to shop for 7-inches right now. Like if you're someone who collects a lot of 7-inches, then your want list is going to reflect that. I don't think you need a filter for it. So yeah, and honestly, if you were someone who collected multiple types of media, again, like would you, if there was a seller that had a record that you wanted and a CD that you wanted and a cassette that you wanted, would you want to exclude them because you were filtering just for cassettes? Like it just doesn't make any sense to me, and it just feels like this was all done by someone who was just looking at the tools at their disposal and not really thinking about like not even what the average buyer or collector does, but like what the power collector does, right? So I wouldn't consider myself a power collector. I'm sure there are people who spend a ton of money on this website, and this is again the main way that they make money. So they should be designing this feature around enabling their top X% of users who probably represent, it could be like an 80-20 thing, right? It could be like 20% of the users are generating 80+% of the revenue. Design around them. Like, do you know that there are people who want to be able to filter and only look for jazz on their want list, or are they like only want to look at 45s or 7-inches? Like, do you know that, or do you think that they are looking for? Yeah. So I feel like this whole thing is just kind of done in a way that's not actually thought of about product. It's not thought about user experience. I think they just figured, let's give our people a ton of buttons to press and they'll think that's really cool and happy. There are things that I like I said, like I like the media condition filtering that was also present before. I believe minimum seller rating is good to have. A minimum number of ratings is good to have. And they enabled you to create some defaults, which is really cool. So I have 2 saved searches, one for US only and one for international, which is one way to like broadly cut. Like if I feel like there's some things I know I'm only going to see internationally versus things I might be able to find in the US and save on shipping because it'll be media mail. So I do appreciate that. But again, overall, I think they're missing out on the biggest thing, which is the easiest way to find sellers that have a lot of what I want so I can make a big order. And the bigger order I make, the more fees Discogs collects. End of story. So that's kind of my take on that. And let's see. I did want to call out another thing that I noticed, and I don't know how well this is worth talking about, but there are some stores on here, and I'm not even sure if I'm not going to call, I'm not going to call anyone out, but I'm not sure what Discogs can do about this. But there are stores or individuals that are abusing the system in 2 ways. One of them is if you're like me and you get an email every day from Discogs, then with all the new stuff that's been added from your want list, you know that you're probably seeing a lot of the same thing every day. And my best guess is that there are sellers out there who have popular releases, maybe newer releases, and they are going in and delisting and relisting every day. Perhaps they have some kind of automated way that they're doing this. I'm not exactly sure. So that way, that is getting into my email every day. And that email is not that long. That email usually is only like 20 to 30 records, and I'm seeing consistently the same sellers in there with the same things. that should be old, but they're making it seem like it's new because I think they're adding it back into the system. That's my best guess. And Discogs is not doing anything to inhibit this as far as I can tell. The other thing to look out for, and I'm going to go find a record here, and we can talk about this. Maybe we'll talk about this one particular seller because I don't think this is malicious necessarily, but it is something that I'm annoyed by. So I've wanted this Mac DeMarco record for a while. It's a relatively new release, right? 2014 indie rock. And you know, if you looked at my previous videos, I only like to collect original pressings or first pressings. And this has been repressed a lot with different colorways and also just like as an album, it's been repressed a lot. So like here's 2014, 2015 album repress, 2020 album reissue. So I want the original. And I go here and I shop. And here's someone who comes into my email a lot who might be doing that trick. I'm not sure. But you can see here this seller who has a lot of positive feedback and a lot of sales has listed this item as the original 2014. But then they wrote in their description that the matrix and runout number cannot be confirmed because it is sealed. So I'm going to cough, so I'm going to pause. So my takeaway here is that this is probably a big store that gets a lot of inventory, probably getting a ton of represses in all the time. And I think they probably know in their heart of hearts that this is not an original 2014 pressing that is still sealed, but probably one of the later repressings considering the amount of volume they do. So my most generous interpretation here, though, is that whoever is in charge of doing all their listing, and again, they must have someone or some process for listing, really, you know, like a lot because they've done so much volume on the platform. I mean, this might be one of the largest amount of feedback I've ever seen from an individual seller that just perhaps they just don't have the time. They just don't have the time to guess or go and appropriately put this as the 2018 or the 2021 or whatever it actually might be. And so they just put it here and they decide to add this disclaimer so that way when you get it and it's not what they said it was, they're protected. I had this issue come up with a different seller who actually wasn't putting this little bit of verbiage in their description. And there was a bunch of like post 2010, more recent releases that I wanted that they were like mint, sealed, but they weren't. Yeah. So I was like, oh, this is cool. This person has like a bunch of these things and they are recent enough that they could still be sealed. And I think I ordered 6 or 8 records from them, opened them. One of them was correct, and it was something that was like more recent from post 2020 that hadn't even been repressed. So that one was a slam dunk. And all the rest were later represses once I went and checked the matrix numbers. And I was able to negotiate eventually a return and a refund, though they weren't super happy about it. And I just said like, hey, I don't think you did this on purpose, but like these are later pressings and you put them in the wrong category and we have this whole database. So I do think there is seller responsibility there. I guess you could argue, does this verbiage allow you to intentionally or not make a mistake like that or misrepresent what it is? I don't appreciate it. I don't like it. I also don't know why you wouldn't just default to the more recent pressing and say that we can't confirm it with the matrix run out. Like, why are you putting it in the first pressing? So that's a bit of a rant. I think that's a bad seller practice. I can understand why it might happen due to just like volume or laziness, but I still think it's something that, you know, I don't know what Discogs could do about it. Maybe you could start a strike system or disallow this type of disclosure here as a way to justify listing incorrectly. Like for my personal take, or what I would want to do is I would just want to be able to block this seller because I don't trust this. I don't trust now to buy anything from them because I know that they're kind of running this. They found this way around having to list their product accurately, and so I would just want them to stop showing up in my feed, even if they do have items on my want list. So maybe that's the simplest thing. Is like allow me to block this person, allow me to block the people who are flooding my email with relistings every day, and yeah. So that I guess that would be the easiest thing. But let's move on. That was a lot. What do I have next? Let me pull up my note. here. Well, I have my notes somewhere, but that's okay. I think the only other thing I wanted to touch on really quickly, which is super minor again, the collection view. I actually really love the collection view. I like having the album art here and some of the changes they've made. I don't think it looks bad. I appreciate it a lot. I love the filtering here and the sorting. Release year has been really useful for me as I try to figure out what I collected in 2025 from 2025 versus what I just added to my collection in 2025, which you can sort for here. I like being able to add my add columns and stuff, which is really useful because you can export your collection as a CSV, basically a fancy spreadsheet. And I was trying to do a project where I was like trying to build a little process to print out labels for my records based on exporting the CSV. So that way I don't have to like handwrite labels. I can just print out like 500 labels. But I did figure it out. And then of course I ran into the problem of like, well, now I have to track down each one of these records and match it to the label. So I've kind of given up on that, but maybe next year. But all to say, I think this view is really, really great. I really enjoy it. And the one thing I don't like about it though, is that they've locked the tabs to go up, forward, or backwards in your collection down here at the bottom. I would love to have this available on both ends, and that's it. This is only something I noticed recently as I started using this more to create content and like look at my collection more critically. This is really busy up here. I understand why they don't have it up here because we already have so many different menus and bars and links. So it's just one more thing to shove up here, but I would love to have an easy way to do it. So now I'm going to go back to big. I lost my notes, but the last thing I want to talk about, which we've already touched on a little bit, is I guess the best way to talk about this is to call it the fragility of the platform. If that's like perhaps the best way to think about it. The platform is a very centralized point of failure for us as a community. And that's scary to me as someone who's been involved in other collecting communities, like the art community, magic cards, like anything that I've done. Having a centralized point, in this case, for all the information about records, right? Images, dead wax, people's comments. Like there's a lot of information on older records too. Like if you go into some of those Blue Notes, you see people talking about this or that and arguing, and like all that information is valuable to have and preserve, especially when it's like not just or even things like what's the quality of the music, right? Like this pressing sounds better than that pressing. It's all subjective, but it's also, I think, the type of thing that as a community we want to preserve those discussions and make sure that they're always around in the future to be referenced back to. And as far as I can tell, the only place where all of this stuff is being placed is on Discogs. So we have this centralized point of failure in the community that if for whatever reason, and this is not me saying I think Discogs is going out of business. I have never talked to anyone there. I have no reason to believe that. I use it all the time. They're collecting fees off of me plenty. So I don't think that's the case, but I'm just saying that it's not a charity. It is a business. And we could get to a point in the future where Discogs, for whatever reason, just decides, maybe who knows, like maybe the hobby goes into a big lull and the fees go down and they just decide that they're going to close it. And then what happens, right? They have this huge database with server costs to keep it running. And so then that has to go somewhere, or we would need it to go somewhere. And then we would need someone or someones to be paying those costs every month to keep that server going so that we can keep pinging it for information, checking on our collections, adding to them, adding more new stuff up there. So I don't know. I don't have a solution to this. I'm just saying this is like my bigger meta critique or concern around the platform is what happens if and when Discogs goes away. Are there any, I'm going to cough again. Are there any alternatives that could be built on top of it easily, or any way to back it up? Is there anyone from the greater VC talking to people at Discogs, kind of like voicing this concern of like, what's the legacy of this database that you've all developed? Because as far as I understand, like this was not the original idea for Discogs. It was never meant to scale in this way, both as the size of the database or the marketplace side. So I think a lot of the critiques that people have, they probably, and myself included, to the actual user experience, they know well, and they just can't make changes or make them easily, or they're too costly to justify. So, I'm sure there's a lot of ton of legacy code issues and data architecture issues that prevent them from very easily doing some of the things that to us feel like, well, why don't you just make it better? And yeah, I don't know what the solution to that is either, other than charity, right? Like someone has to come in and fund essentially a parallel rebuilding of everything that will solve some of these system issues that we have, solve some of the design issues and the flows for editing the database, so that it can move forward, be easier to use, and also build that in parallel in such a way that all of the existing data can be imported and preserved. So it's a very big task, and I am sure, again, that the people who work at Discogs for the most part are collectors and love this stuff and would love to figure it out. I would actually love to talk to someone from Discogs if they are allowed to and willing to do interviews, kind of more focus on this issue of the longevity of the platform, the database issues, the legacy issues, and and get that out there more, because if they can't solve certain things, then I think we need to, as a community, figure out what is the alternative tool going to be, because records have been around for a long time, and people are going to still want to collect, people are still going to want to do this, and if we lose that tool for whatever reason, if it breaks or it just becomes not profitable to run anymore, how are we going to, what's going to be our centralized source of truth? What is going to be our source of truth for this or that pressing of this or that record? Not even just the value of things, but just purely the raw data, the information. So food for thought. I don't really have any big things there. If any of you have thought about this at all, drop a comment below, because it's it makes me wish I was a programmer. I would be just spending all my free time trying to build something on the side to help work out this problem. But all right, I'm losing my voice, as you can tell, so I'm going to end this here. I hope you all enjoyed this little Discogs diversion. I'll be back soon, hopefully, with some of my 2025 end of year collecting. And that's it. All right. See you all later. Bye.